season 3. Take 1 here. We have an exciting episode to kick off the season with Amy Harrison, football and soccer coach, depending on what part of the world you're in. Amy, thank you so much for making time to be on here today. I think you have such an interesting story, especially because we kind of grew up together, and to see you venturing off and doing some big things in another part of the world. We're in very different time zones right now. We just finished lunch and you probably just finished dinner. Yeah. So thank you for being accommodating for our recording time here. And just want to start by, passing it over to you and have you share a little bit about, where you've been, what's going on today, and then we'll get into it.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Winnipeg born and raised. I grew up in Canada. I played youth soccer in Winnipeg, played for the youth national team for Canada, and had a really good football soccer career as a player. I went down to the US and played at University of Tennessee Division I for 4 years, and then went on to play in Scotland for a couple years for both Rangers and Hearts. And at the time, that was in 2013, the league was, you could probably say semi-pro, but that was probably pushing it. It was, very little number of players that were being paid. And I worked full time at the same time. I worked in marketing, which was my degree from university, and then kind of didn't really see that progressing, wanted to start my career. So moved home to Winnipeg and was working for actually the Winnipeg Jets with doing marketing at their training facility, and then started coaching. And that really is where kind of it got started for me. I was coaching back in the club that I grew up playing in Winnipeg South End United, and then got involved in the provincial program, which was called the Rex program, which then took me on to Vancouver, which I worked in kind of what they called the Super Rex, which is where the best players of the smaller provinces went on to move there and have a residency program. Did that for a few years, and that was over COVID, which was quite the experience. And then moved home. I got the opportunity as a technical director for one of the biggest clubs in Winnipeg, Bonnie Vital. And just with this world, this industry that I'm in, the coach that I was working for in Vancouver, Chris Sargent, he actually got, at the same time I moved back to Winnipeg, he got the assistant coach job over here in Denmark at FC Nordsjælland. And then that year later, he ended up getting the head coach job. So he called me, brought me over, and long story short, now I've been here for about 2.5 years, working as the assistant coach of the women's team. We are we are in the top Danish league for the women's side. And it is, it's a professional league, and the game is definitely growing over here, and more players are really earning quite the living, or at least one that they can live off of, and it continues to grow. So it's been quite the journey and quite the experience, but it's brought me, football's brought me to so many places across the world, both as a player and as a coach, and the experiences now that I'm having here is really incredible. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind for sure.
That's fantastic. That is a wonderful recap. I don't even know where to go. I have moments like this where all of a sudden I like pause. I'm like listening to someone's story. I'm just like, oh my God. But that is so cool. And it is, it's probably a very small circle within the coaches community then too. Obviously people want to, follow and bring good people along the journey with them as they're moving up. But we've seen like a lot of it, advancement. I'm more familiar with some of the stuff that we have going on in Canada in terms of like women's sports expanding in hockey. And it sounds like soccer is at a similar stage. As I mentioned, we won't get into details of the podcast I was just listening to, but they talked a lot about the expansion of soccer specifically in women's sports there. And obviously you said like some people are making, or which it was not common before by the sounds of things, making a living in the sport. So what are you seeing on that end of things in terms of advancements over the last 5 years that's changed?
Yeah. I just think back to when I was playing at Rangers and the facilities we were using, and obviously the players that were being brought in compared to where that league in Scotland is now. But then I even look at the US. Now they've had a couple different professional leagues, and now this one's just taken off, and it is definitely sustainable, and people are investing in it. And it's not just like a charity case anymore. People are actually seeing women's sports as an investment opportunity where they can make some significant revenue off of it. And I think it's definitely something that people want to be invested in, want to be involved in. And I think the biggest thing with the Canadian soccer scene right now is the fact that they're starting a league this year. And it's been
Cool.
such a long time coming, and a lot of people that I know are involved in the league as both coaches and players and administration. And it's just fantastic to see that growing, because if I'm being honest, as a coach, I wanted to get into the professional game and I had to leave in order to do so. And it's so great to be able to see coaches now, young coaches, being able to get involved in that in some way and not have to leave the country. So not have to leave home necessarily either. So it's wonderful. I'm loving it. And you start to see all of the leagues across the world growing and more new leagues popping up. You can always say that the English league has done well, and maybe, Germany and things like that, but a lot of leagues are catching up, and the competition is just, there's more and more opportunities for the players and places to play and different pathways to take. I think that's what's really important as well. We have a lot of young players in Canada, and we actually just signed a young player that we used to coach in Vancouver, now over here. But she had so many options. She had the NCAA, she had the Canadian League, and of course, many, many other options across the world. And that's not the same as what we had growing up as players. So yeah, I could go on and on about it, but it's truly like exciting.
Please do. No, it's great to hear that, because I mean, I think a lot of time we would have taken that for obviously granted on the guy side of things for sports. Lots of avenues that you could see the path for. Now trailblazing, forging the way through that. This would be like, I guess, technically speaking, like the first generation to be able to do that. And then after that, it's like people will be able to see those success stories and get more pumped up about staying in the sport. Oh gosh, I was about to reference a stat that I didn't know enough about. I'll pause on that and not do that. Like fall off though from like females in sport over years.
Oh yeah.
I will say that generally that is like a common thing, and I think it's probably a little bit correlated to what you were saying there about like seeing a future or a path within there. I know that there's good girl friends of mine that played hockey and stuff and kind of gave up on the sport because of not having a path to continue on. Meanwhile, they definitely could have been probably playing at the high level. And I'm referencing hockey just because I've seen more of it lately. But hopefully we'll see more soccer watching. But it's I've heard and seen some posts about them, chatting about like it's great that this happened. Too bad it's now kind of thing. But still big supporters of it, and that's great to hear it's happening in other sports. And
Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing is it's for players, but it's also for anybody involved in the sport too. So coaches for sure, but also any administrators. And I think that is such a good point in terms of girls seeing a future, but it's the same with women coaches. So, if we're competing for jobs as women in the male game, there's not a lot of, I will speak from the soccer side. There's not a lot of men's professional teams that are hiring women coaches. They might be hiring women administrators, not as many, but they're not hiring. No one's really stepped up to hire a female coach. There's been a couple in Europe, which has been fantastic, but so that's the limited opportunities then. And now with having the female game, of course, the male coaches will be involved, but it's also just more of an opportunity for females to get in there.
I think it's a great word. And totally, that's fantastic. As it's expanding. And the team you're with now, could we dive in a little bit more about that? You were telling me, filling up my brain with amazing knowledge about that before. Could we share a little bit of that again about like where you're at and how that program is working right now, for whatever you can share?
Yeah. So I'm at FC Nordsjælland, which is in a small town called Farum, which is right above Copenhagen, about 30 minutes north. And FC Nordsjælland is a part of Right to Dream. Right to Dream is an organization that owns an academy in Ghana, academy in Egypt, which is very recent, about the last year. Obviously, ourselves as FC Nordsjælland, which is the professional route for those players in those academies. But now they actually also have a part of that group is San Diego FC, which is the MLS team, that expansion team that is starting just this season, and which is huge. And so there's just another professional route on the men's side there, and there will be a female girls academy. Obviously, there's a San Diego Wave is the NWSL team there, so they're not necessarily a female professional team there, but there's a lot of different moving parts to our organization, and it's extremely multicultural. There's people from all over the world involved in this organization and also working all over the place. So even 2.5 years ago when I got here, the growth has been incredible. It was only the Ghanaian Academy that existed along with us. And being able to see those players in those academies have different ways of progressing, and even our players here, the men's side, being able to have an opportunity maybe to get into the MLS if that's the route that they want to go, there is that. So we are not just a professional club. There's just so many other facets to what we do, and I think there's so much meaning behind Right to Dream, and it's all about the people first when we talk about the players, and when we talk about that, it's about the culture and our values. And we have a really, really strong culture here. And I'll just speak for the women's team as well. That's something that we've put so much time into. And Chris, the head coach, has really, really hammered home that, when he first took over the head coach job, it's been a lot of work on the culture and, bringing in the right people and the right staff and that are all aligned, and making sure that they understand exactly what we're looking for and what we're about. And so if I can speak for that, we've had so much success, and it's solely down to the culture, because everybody wants to work for each other, and the amount of work that's put in both on the pitch and off the pitch, players, staff, club, everybody here has been huge in being able to help that. So it's been a fun, wild 2.5 years, but we had some really good success. The first season we won the cup, which was exciting. We weren't noted down to win that one, but we did, and it kickstarted the next season. We ended up actually winning the league and winning the cup at the same time. They call it the double, and so that was amazing. And now how the league works here, we're actually halfway through it. So it starts in August and it goes until June. But there's quite a long break in the middle, which is kind of our second preseason, and it's solely due to weather, and not all the clubs have the ability to be able to play on their pitches in the wintertime. We are very lucky here with a heated turf pitch to play on. But it's a long break, so now we have kind of a second preseason right now, and we're sitting in second place, and we're still in the cup run, so that'll be a few more games, and yeah, it's going well again this year, but we're excited to continue to push there.
Fantastic. So, and it's then considered kind of like season 3 out of that story?
This is in the middle of season 3, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Exactly.
Well, I guess we're just kicking off season 3 on the podcast. You guys are doing it over
there. There you go. Perfect fit.
Yeah, perfect timing on this whole thing here. That is so neat. Okay, wait. Question about the turf though. Heated I mean, obviously climate that you're coming from and I'm in here, like it's just so it's like warm enough to still kind of be outside, but it's just keeps the snow and anything.
I'd say it gets to be about -10 here, but there is snow, and so how the turf works is it just heats, like you can see the line about a foot outside of the turf, like the lines of the pitch, that it is heated until and but if it does snow a lot, it's you have to shovel it, but typically, like, there's not that much snow, so we just continue on it. So it's pretty, the technology is insane. It's amazing.
Super neat. What does the training program look like for off field? I guess I don't know if it's like stretching or other stuff. I know I've recently heard like a bunch of things. I personally have also purchased them, like cold plunges. Like, what's the routine look like? Doing that kind of stuff over there?
Yeah. Well, I'll just speak for the Danish culture of saunas. No, that's not what we do here at the club, but just in their personal life, they love a good sauna and a jump in the ocean. That's something that we've done on our personal time, which is incredible. It's amazing. It's kind of like Winnipeg's Thermea, but natural.
Right.
Yeah, so it's pretty fun. But no, for the performance side, we have in our staff, we've got a strength coach, which is our physical coach. We have medical, we have a physio, and then we also have a sports psych. And so with that, the players have access, like we have quite a intricate gym program for them. In the off season, they are lifting quite heavy. They do their running programs and everything. And then when they come back in, there's a ton of testing. something that I have noticed as a difference, which I find fascinating, is in North America, it's very much treating injuries with, there's like exercises and things like that, but there's also your physiotherapy in the way of acupuncture and chiropractic and all these different things. But I would say that the biggest difference here, and the biggest difference that North American players feel when they come here, is that yes, they will have manual treatment, they'll have massage and things like that access to, but it's strength based. So preventing injuries as well as recovering from injuries is very much strength based. So it's we've found that players leaving from here to go to other clubs don't do nearly as much strength in season. So I will say our players often feel quite sore even in season, not just in the off season, where if I think back to being in the NCAA, it was a very heavy lifting program and running program in the off season, but then we would barely lift in season so that we would be fresh for games. And obviously our players here are fresh for games, but they are sore in different ways because it then prevents the injuries such as ACLs and things like that, that obviously can just happen, but we want to try and avoid it as best we can. And they use strength as that biggest element there. It's quite interesting.
No, totally. That was another thing I was talking before. For sure. Quite extensively about that. And so like that's specifically from North American training that you've seen there. Now, we'll say in very like big stroke here, but like across Europe, this is very common practice.
I would say here, I can't speak really for anywhere else in Denmark. It might be a Danish thing, but I would say from experience and what we've heard from different leagues and maybe England and things like that, they don't do as much strength as we do. They prioritize other things. But yeah, so it's quite unique, I would say, in how they deal with that. I think the other piece that is really important is obviously player wellness. And that I would like to say is happening across the world. It's so important. Players' mental health. Players will fill out a wellness survey every morning, regardless of whether we have training or not. And that covers how they're feeling physically, how they're feeling mentally, soreness, as well as sickness, everything like that. Hours of sleep, which is really, really important. And if they want to make any other notes. So our human performance team, they are looking at that every single day before we train. And so it's just so important, and access to our sports psych as well. He does an unbelievable job at making sure our players are doing okay, because we know the demands of sport are extreme. And I think it actually ties into the type of team we have. We actually are very, very young. The idea of who we are as an organization is we have a significant number of players still in school under 18 years old. So what we want to do is develop our players in our young youth academy and then progress them into our senior team when they're ready, and then move them on and when they are ready to do so. And with having a young team in school, and then we have a couple players that are still working as well, and then a handful of players that are older and full-time. But with those players that are doing other things and required to do other things, it's a very, very high mental load for them. And so when we think about that, we also have to take that in consideration with our scheduling, with the demands that we put on them from the football side. So we would probably differ schedule-wise than a lot of other clubs in Denmark, as well as anywhere else in the world. We train in the mornings so that players can go off to school, which thankfully, since my time here, has moved to be a little bit later. We start at 8:30 on the pitch, but we have a meeting at 7:15, and it's an early morning. It used to be a lot earlier, but we've made some progress there. But the players, so then they can move on to school in the day. And so we have to be cautious and mindful of that and make sure that we're not overloading them schedule-wise and not having 7 days a week. We would never do that, but we also don't have 6 days a week a lot of times. Whereas other clubs, if they have a match, they would probably come in on a match day +1 to do a recovery session, but we actually give it off. Players are required to do their own, whatever they need to do, but it's so that they can do their homework. We're young, so it's a lot different for a professional environment than probably a lot of other places as well.
That's super interesting, especially I'll note this because of, not to build it up for season 3 here, but your success in the first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
This is proven track record to work to some degree. It's working really well. So
it's been working. I'd like to say it wasn't luck. But I think what I will say is a lot of the other teams, there's been a lot of news that's come out about them putting more into their women's program. Like you could say they quoted it as becoming fully professional. And so with that, there's a lot more money and a lot more investment going into it. And so we have to raise our standards too, and make sure that, I think one of the biggest things is making sure that our academy, we have the resources there and we're continuing to develop players there, because that really is our purpose, making sure we have a continuous pipeline of players that are able to come into our senior team. Something that's really neat and unique about our club is that we have a style of play that is the same on the women's side as it is the men's side. And it's the same as it is in our academies in Ghana and Egypt. So with that style of play, we play a very, very specific certain way. And having our academy on that same style of play allows for those players to be really in tune with what we require and need at the senior level and how we will need them to play if they step up into that. So it's pretty streamlined. The people involved in the academy are very, very good in making sure that the players are ready. So it's taken a lot of work. I would even say the resources since I've been here into the academy have progressed significantly. The number of staff, the number of top level management that are involved has gotten more and more. And you can kind of see that as we have 2-3 players every year coming into our senior team.
That is fantastic. I'm also in awe again. I was like hearing this storyline, the evolution here. This just sounds super great. How much time, or 2 questions, but we'll do the tech. How much is tech involved in what you guys are doing nowadays? There's a lot of film stuff. I know that there's level stuff, just loosely watching, hearing things on podcasts, but what does that look like? It sounds like you might even have some right away. I'm just kind of
I mean, like the game. Yeah, tech is huge. It plays a part in everything that we do. We are so lucky to have just actually hired a full-time analyst that was working on the men's side and has actually shifted over to he's doing both, but he's very much with us, and mathematician at trade, and he's an absolute genius. And we have our goalkeeper coach also works with him as an analyst as well. They do every single training session. I'm looking out at the pitch now. There's camera systems built in. We use a company called Speedio. We also have that system built into the training pitches outside as well. And that system we have as a portable device that we take into our away games. Everything's linked through the same system. They can do stats through that. We have online programs where we can analyze the footage, and then those guys, our stats guys, as we call them, they take all the information and then they're using all the coding and they're using R and being able to analyze every single moment of the game and getting all the stats that we need. We use a program called, very well known in the football world, Y-Scout as well. In addition to the stats that we're making ourselves, we use that. That's all the games get uploaded into that automatically, and individual player stats come from that Y-Scout. And then we do a lot of team stats within in-house. And I would say once a week, our players are shown their stats, and definitely in the breaks that we have, both in the summer and the winter, there's a lot of work done on the analysis of where we need to progress, what areas of the game we need to be spending more time on, and what where we're not being as efficient as we need to be. So yeah, it's wild. We're constantly on it, and I'm becoming more and more, it's honestly what they do. I'm just like amazed. I did a master's degree, and one of our classes was analytics, and I'm like, I'm a coach. I'm going to let the analysts do this stuff, but it's just magic. They can have it all automated and processed, and kind of spits out exactly what we're looking for. It's wonderful.
That is, well, that kind of answered my next one too, in terms of like how much time you guys spend reviewing that with the team. Like, I mean, like back then I used to be like watching a lot of like sports tapes, and I mean, they've shown a lot of like documentaries, but it sounds like this is like a couple steps further. Like, we're probably not spending that time watching that tape as much as it is like reviewing maybe a specific. Or do you guys still watch a lot of game?
We still watch the full game back. We code the game. I should say we code every game, and so we can watch the game back, and then we can also watch certain moments of the game that we're looking for. The other thing that's really useful is in scouting. So both with the like opposition in our league or opposition that we're playing with abroad, but for scouting players in different teams and leagues. So if we're looking to bring a player in, you can see all their individual stats. You can see all of their games from however long. I don't know if any league like NCAA is on Y Scout. So you can see everything from the player. You can watch full matches. You can watch their clips, best practice, all that stuff. So that also is really helpful. And we have actually done a lot of work. I'm one of the people that's responsible for the individual player development within our team. And we've actually done a project recently on in that individual player development. They select, it's very much player driven. So we don't give them growth areas of their game. We actually ask them to come to us with their areas that they want to work on. And then we input and suggest and work with them. So it's extremely collaborative. In that, we have outcome goals. And of course, we all know outcome goals. We want them to be quite specific. We want them to be attainable. But those goals can often be a little bit difficult to say, okay, well, I want to have a 90% pass accuracy. Well, okay, what are center backs doing in other leagues? And what are they in maybe what you'd consider a top league in the world where that player wants to progress to. But then we found it difficult because we're looking at our stats that are comparing us against the level that we're playing against. And those, again, might be, for example, a team in France. If it's PSG, the difference from PSG to some of the bottom teams in that division are significant. And so PSG might be winning 10-0, and then the stats get extremely skewed. So style of play in those leagues also have a really big factor in there as well. So we've done a big project on kind of looking at how we can use other players' stats from different leagues and compare a little bit and give our players a little bit more of a realistic view of where they're at. So we're now trying to see how we can put that into play.
No, I think that makes sense. My brain started to hurt thinking about like big
Sorry.
data.
I don't know if I explained it very well.
But sort of wandering. I was like, blah, blah, blah. But like how, like within those other games, I just had some visuals of like different teams and then like different calibers. If they're having a really high percentage in one game, and maybe kind of skew the stats for versus higher level or wherever you guys are at. And depending on how competitive the other team is or that league, it may not be perfect if you're trying to compete with someone maybe in a lower league, but they're really high performer at a 90% pass rate, like yours maybe there. And your person's already at like a 75, but that's kind of like top of, where they probably get to.
Exactly. And so I think the other thing is like, so we ask I'll just use a goalkeeper. We ask our goalkeeper to play with their feet all the time. So we want to build up from the back all the time. We're very, very, not often are we hitting it long. Whereas there's a lot of different teams that we might be comparing ourselves to, or individuals are comparing themselves to, that actually the center backs are doing a lot more long balls, or goalkeepers are doing a lot more long balls. So then their accuracy might be going down, or this and that. So also the team's style and what they're looking for plays a part. So we have to see how that can, so we've done, it's fun. It's a big project. And thankfully I've got the geniuses working on it to help me out, but yeah.
The stats department, anyone who's listening, I took stats like 4 times and almost didn't make it through university. So.
You're telling me.
It was a bit dicey. So one of our stats people usually make fun of me if they know that about me. But we'll get somebody in here for the history of Steve. That is so cool.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning the average age is a little. I think you were just mentioning this or whatever. So how does that compare to other teams in the league? And I mean, obviously it sounds like you're performing very well, but what's the difference there? And then yeah, they're maybe just dive into that a little bit more, because you mentioned like some, like I guess high school quite literally,
Yeah.
right, in school and stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I should know, but we've just added players, and actually we sold a couple players this break as well, and so I would have to relook at that, but our average age was in and around 21, 22, whereas I would say like upwards of 25 plus on other teams. Now, of course, with age it comes experience and things like that, but we very much rely on our style of play. So and of course culture and everything that we are about as a team, and our fight and everything. So it's definitely interesting. We went to because we won the league last season, the top 2 teams in Denmark go on to play in Champions League. And so Champions League, as the men, we get drawn. If you're first, you go into the Champions path. If you're second, you go into the league path. It's very complicated, and it's also changing, so I won't go into it, but we got drawn into a group with 4 teams, one being Benfica, which is one of the best teams in the world, from Portugal, another being a team from the Faroe Islands, and a team from Bosnia. And so it was drawn that we play in Bosnia. So we played Benfica, which is one of the best teams in the world, and I would say probably one of the best teams in the entire draw at the time, at that level where we entered. And so we got a tough draw, but might as well play one of the big guns. And we played in Bosnia, so it was an amazing experience. But if we look at that, the age of the Benfica team compared to ours was significant. There was a massive difference, and in the first half, it took us a little bit to get into it. We were a bit starstruck in a way. We struggled to play our way of football because they high pressed us, and we really want to play out of the back, and they took advantage of some of our mistakes. But in the second half, once the team realized we can actually hang, even doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the experience level, we played really, really well, and it ended 3-1. But I think that's the best example of trust the youth. I know that there's a lot of clubs that do this around the world where they play with the young players. Our men's team has had significant success with playing the young players, and then of course those players moving on to big leagues in the world, but also having success playing young players, and a lot of clubs, and even for us, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's a little scary to put in a young 16-year-old for the first time, because it's not just it's really not about the wins and losses at certain points for us. We very much are a women's professional team. It's about results, but we are developing players. That is our core value, core goal here. So thankfully, the club has given us that backing to, we might play players and might then lose a game here or there. And that's okay, because then they will learn so much in that experience to then be able to play in the next game or the next game and be able to have success. And we've seen it. And I think we just need to keep relying on that, that understanding that it'll work out. And sometimes it just takes a few hiccups, and that's just the reality of development.
Oh, for sure. I'm thinking back to, like I said, semi-quasi lower level hockey. Like big games there that were kind of intense, and you have those flashbacks in sport. And I'm sure, you did on your professional journey playing your end, get in a big arena, or there's more people in the stands, whatever it is. It's neat that you guys are able to kind of offer those pretty wild experiences age wise. So how your team is a little bit more focused on the younger things, but how old do players get before they're kind of retire?
Oh, that can really vary. I mean, if you think of Christine Sinclair, she was played for a very long time. So I would say that's probably one of the older players in the game before she retired this past year, as well as Marta. Marta's still playing. I'm not going to say their age because I don't know it, and I don't want to say what their age is. But it can go upper ends of 30, I will say. And of course, that's if they take care of themselves. And there's so many variables that could end a player's career. So it's sometimes luck and environments, and making sure that wherever you are, they're taking care of you too. So it can vary.
Well, I don't know, that was a light one on the top of my head. I'm like, okay, if you're average is like, mid to late 20s, then
Yeah, you hope that they can go on past like 32, 33 onwards. I would say this maybe like a 35, 36-year-old in the league right now, in our league, not in our team, but in our league. Yeah, so it's and I think the biggest thing is, in order to be able to play that long, you have to have the resources to do it. I mean, back in the day, you weren't having players last that long because they didn't have the strength programs to help them prevent injuries, and you didn't have the like any of the medical that they do now, the technology and things. So
awesome. The other thing I wrote down here was snack time, but more diet. But I was going
yeah,
to funny and ask about snack time if you still have
yeah.
intermittent. But there, how we talk about like lots of other stuff, but in terms of like diet, I mean, I noticed a difference recently. Just on a trip over to Europe, and like the quality food was solid. And I'm sure within training for professional sport, that's kind of taken to a next level there. What are some of the practices in the sport nowadays around diet?
Yeah, I mean, we're so lucky here at the club. Every time we have a training, the players get a meal after, and the chefs do an incredible job, the nutritionists. So they're really well taken care of in that sense. And we have a nutritionist in the club that the players can speak to if they need for any information, and they're given they're put through different workshops and different information along the way. But it's a lot of it comes down to their own choices and making sure that they have the right education to make those choices. It can be harder for some, but as long as we can support them and they ask for that help, especially with our young players, sometimes they just don't know. We just try our very best. We have such good staff in terms of the human performance side that when we're away, the options are amazing. The snacks, as you said, are actually, we do have snack time. We do have snacks that players have access to, but they're good snacks for them. But I think one of the biggest things is just making sure they get enough food and enough fuel. And if that's a pizza after a game, that's a pizza after a game. They just need that fuel to recover and be able to perform again. And sometimes that can often be looked at poorly, but players just need to eat. And of course, the right choices are important, but just making sure they have what they need when we're on trips, especially. So.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. Well, and it's neat to hear you call it fuel. I had a guest on, I think it was in season 2, maybe it was season 1, and they were a distance runner, and Jess is a good friend of mine, and she talks about fuel all the time on all of her posts and stuff, and she's a nutritionist by trade, and like I just find that fascinating now. It used to be more, I think, in many ways, like more calorie focused to just like the number of calories that in like history, and now it's a little bit different. And it's not as focused, to your point too, is, it's okay to have some different meals in the mix. Just if, we'll say like 9 out of 10 of, the things that you're putting down the hatch are healthy and, hopefully fresher and stuff. Yeah, it's okay. Before, I think a lot of time you get crazy pressure to like eat nothing but greens or protein shakes or out. And then it's like, you have no leniency in there. You still got to have kind of a life, especially when they're, younger adults and stuff. It's like, if you take that all away, it's got to become like no fun at some point.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and a good handful of our players are still at home, so they often don't have their parents are making their meals for them. So they need to have a voice to be able to share what they need. And but a lot of them are doing really well with it. And again, there's lots of times where players are struggling with it, but making sure that we have that open dialogue. There is such a good relationship between our human performance team and the players that we hope, and that's where the culture comes in. It's a safe place. There is significant, I would say, worry, but also we need to be careful. And I don't want to say just the women's game. I think it's both, honestly, both the women's and the men's game, just making sure that we're not hyper focused on what they're eating, because it's, it can be harmful, really harmful and damaging to the mental health of the players if, they're being watched. And we've seen it, and it's not okay. So we just need to make sure that we're using the right terminology. We're using the right processes, and we don't weigh players here. Other clubs might, but we don't, because it's not worth it. Yes, of course, you can get a lot of information from doing so, and using the body scans and things like that. But when we talk about eating disorders and those types of severe, extremely horrific things that players could possibly go through, it's not worth it to be really harping on that. The education side is really where it's at. It's just making sure that they know what they can eat, what they should eat, and making sure they get enough fuel, as I said. So
yeah, sorry, I love you sharing that about I started off with school, and it's neat. That's like sounds like a thing that I thought maybe you actually would. I hadn't thought about it a lot, but you probably white people, but it's good that you don't, I guess.
Yeah, it's a big topic of conversation. It's a huge one, and one that we've had a lot of times here.
Yes.
But that's just where we're at now. I'm not saying we won't in the future, or we'll find a magical way of doing it where it's not harmful and where players feel compared to others, and not that we would ever put them up against each other, but it's just even if it's all private, it's still in a way can feel public for players. So it's a scary one that you need to really tread lightly on, and one that I'm passionate about making sure that we don't even touch it personally. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So just to kind of look in the future here and wrapping anything, and if there's anything that you want to drop in the last bit here, feel free to jump in and do so. But so you're coming off of break now. You guys have a cool heated turf thing.
Yeah.
And running into the latter half of the season now. It seems like it's a little bit shorter. How many games are left in this part of the season until we can kind of catch up and stay up to date on results from here to follow the team and stuff? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we actually are heading we're heading on an away trip. In every preseason, we typically will go away and play against international competition. So we are doing that in February, which is always exciting. Hopefully we get some sun. I don't know that I can share where it is because I don't know that it's all finalized yet. But hopefully some warm weather typically. And then we will come back and we will start with our first game as a cup game. And so we have one cup game and then we start the season the next weekend. And how the league works here is that there are 8 teams to start in August in the Kvindeliga. And by the time Christmas comes, the bottom 2 teams go down to the first division and fight to stay up in the Kvindeliga in the spring. So we were second. So we move on with the top 6 in the spring now. And so we play everybody home and away. We get 10 games between end of March and June. And so there'll be, I feel like I might mess this up, but we have one cup game and then I think it's the semifinal, might be one more, which is the semifinal for sure is a home and away. And then there is a final for the cup final. Typically, for the last 2 years, they've done the cup final after the end of the league. And what they have done the reason for that is they have a Danish competition, Danish championships in June. And that is typically over on the other side of Denmark. So the cup final has been played as the first event at that championships to kind of just kick off the whole thing. And it's usually those championships are actually individual sports. So it's quite unique. But I think they've kind of gone back to what they used to do, and they've actually put it in the season this year. So it'll be in May, and then we'll have a few more games to finish the league. So that'll actually give us a little bit more time in the summer. But in the past, with us being in part of that championships, it's been exciting. The number of fans, even though we've been 5 hours away from home, there's a bus that goes from Nordsjælland and a couple buses and people coming in from all over. So there's actually been lots of people, even though it's been neutral ground. But I'm excited for a different format this year as well, where it's in the season, and that'll allow us actually to have a longer break again for before the next season starts, which last year it was quite short. So
very cool. Now, thank you so much for explaining that. I knew just a bit of the language that you do because this is not my field of expertise, but I did watch Ted Lasso. So I love it. I'll have to show this because I totally realized partway through here, but like my coaster in my office is literally
Legendary. So good.
That's from my wall here. But I actually went to the little pub thing there. It was interesting, but they didn't have a dartboard when I was there. And
they didn't have what?
The dartboard. There's like this infamous like episode with the dartboard and like be curious and all this stuff, but like it wasn't in there, and I was kind of like, what the heck? But I guess they set it up differently, and you probably can't have people in there throwing darts because it's often a lot of.
I'm honestly surprised we don't have a dartboard in our office. If I'm honest. We have a dartboard in the club, but we have everything else in our office, but we don't have a dartboard. We like to have a good time, so I wouldn't be surprised.
That's super cool. Yeah. This has been super awesome. Anything else you want to add in? This has been like an amazing episode. But I don't know if we missed anything or if I
think it pretty much covers it. I think the only thing I would say for the Canadian audience is get out and watch the new professional league that's coming and starting in a couple months. The more support, the better. And it'll be really, really exciting. The work that's been put in from Diana Matheson and those that are running the league and the different teams across the country is going to be absolutely fantastic. So I'll put a little plug in there for all my friends and folk over in Canada.
No, that is super great. Amy, thank you so much for making time in your evening and Dade to be on here with the time exchange here. It's been great to dive into what you're up to now, and we are looking forward at the podcast myself here to follow the journey as you keep doing it. So we're looking forward to the future.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy.
Bye.